speaking of interesting,
And
how about the second half?
Right. Well, the second half of the program, I think, I mean, as one who is sort of historically inclined, I don't think you could come up with three more important pieces for the desire, or that exemplify the desire to combine classical and jazz styles. And historically, they are the first three.
That's right.
You know?
And it's funny that you say you don't think you could come up with three more important. Having done that, I don't think I could come up with any more. It was a challenge to do so. So if we have to do this concert again, we might be in trouble. I mean, it's one thing to come up with jazz-inspired music for a full symphony orchestra.
Right. There's plenty of that.
There's plenty of that. But for a very select chamber orchestra of, 5-string players and a couple of horns and so on, it was a challenge. But it is interesting.
It is interesting. And these three pieces, though, really show, I think, something that I guess it's the evidence that something is in play, and people haven't quite figured out how to deal with it just yet, but they're willing to experiment. And really, the force behind this, in a sense, was Paul Whiteman, the band leader.
That's right.
It predates the third string concept, which Gunther Schuller was, in a sense, the founder of, at least he coined the term anyway, in the 50s. So this is 25 years before that.
That's right.
You've got people already thinking in these terms. And some would make the case that Duke Ellington even thought in these terms, back in the 20s and in the 30s with the big band concept. But this is different. This really is about the classical orchestra taking a step into that style. And Paul Whiteman really is the force behind it.
That's right. At least for two out of the three
two out of the
pieces.
three, you're right.
Which are the George Antheil and the Gershwin Rhapsody in Blue. The first piece, actually, it's considered to be the first classical piece with jazz influences, is The Creation of the World by Milhaud, and that was written in 1923. And it's actually a depiction of the creation of the world according to African folklore.
Well, it's actually a ballet.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And that was considered the first, but shortly on its heels, in 1924 came Rhapsody in Blue, and 1925 was the Antheil. And your reference to Paul Whiteman was that Paul Whiteman put on a concert in New York called An Experiment in Modern Music.
Right.
And he invited various composers to contribute to that concert. And one of them was George Gershwin, and he happily accepted. The funny thing about the way this piece was written was that Gershwin apparently forgot that he had agreed to write the piece.
Oops.
So his brother Ira was reading the New York paper and read a very interesting article about a concert coming up in a few weeks that includes a brand new piano concerto by George Gershwin. And Ira said, "What's this all about?" And George suddenly got to work and in 3 weeks wrote the Rhapsody in Blue.
I think if I had to write something that fast, I wouldn't try and write anything in a particular form. I just write a rhapsody.
That's right.
Just let
it doesn't have that
right.
form. And then, the success of that concert led Paul Whiteman to put on a sequel concert to the Experiment in Modern Music. And that is what George Antheil wrote his jazz symphony for. Now here's the thing. He submitted it to Paul Whiteman, but Paul Whiteman turned it down because he considered it to be too radical and too difficult.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so then George Antheil enlisted the band leader W.C. Handy to conduct the premiere. So Antheil put on a concert later of his own works in 1925, and he enlisted W.C. Handy to conduct the concert, the premiere, and they had 25 rehearsals on this one short piece called a Jazz Symphony. And somewhere along the course of those 25 rehearsals, Handy said it's just too difficult to conduct, and he couldn't do it, so he turned it over to someone else. So I'm looking forward to the two rehearsals that we're going to have on this piece.
Well, I think each one of them has a very interesting sort of style to them, within jazz. You've got The Milhaud is a bit what's the word it's a bit more traditional to my ears, in that it's I don't hear the other than some of the rhythmic aspects to it. It still sounds sort of like a classical orchestra. It's basically some rhythms and the blues scale, you know.
And the instrumentation, the addition of saxophone,
right?
That's really gives it a jazz flavor.
Right, that's a good point. The Rhapsody in Blue, I think most folks will be, if they haven't heard the original version before, I think they'll be quite surprised. It's a lot edgier than the lush orchestration that Grofé did later. But the thing that's, I think, the most entertaining, I think, hopefully, if people are aware of this ahead of time, they'll find the Antheil piece extremely entertaining, because there are figures in it that it's hard to know whether he's, you know, sort of quoting or if he's making fun of things, because there's a whole lot of sort of satire in this, and it fits Antheil's personality. He wanted to be the sort of notorious bad boy, yes, of classical music at that time, and he went to France to try and, you know, embody that in some way, because, you know, if you go away and come back, you're much more notorious. But it's interesting, because it really is a very expressive piece, and it's going to be a lot of fun to play. I'm entertained by that 25 rehearsals concept.
And still not.
And still not right.
You know, and talking about tying the program together, the quotes, some of the quotes you mentioned in the Antheil, one of them is the very first measure of The Entertainer, which is the first measure at the beginning of the concert.
Right, isn't that funny? So, well, anyway, I think it's going to be a very entertaining concert. We'll hope people will join us. That's Saturday, October 9th at 7:30, and Sunday, October 10th at 2 o'clock at the Seasons Performance Hall in Yakima, Washington.